To start us off this morning, I would like to introduce Dr. Menah Pratt-Clarke, our Vice President for Strategic Initiatives and Vice Provost for Inclusion and Diversity, to talk about our institutional motto, Ut Prosim, and how that relates to our diversity activities.
It's been almost 2 years since I was at exactly the same event, sharing my thoughts before I started work. And I've spent the past 6 weeks thinking extensively about Virginia Tech. And so I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share some of my thinking and to hear yours. Again, I remind how my colleague has agreed to facilitate a discussion after, so please jot down some notes, ideas, and reflections. My talk is entitled Ut Prosim Imperative, which is a concept I've been thinking about for 2 years. And though it doesn't quite have clarity as a vision, it has become a little less valuable. So I hope we can collectively create that clarity this semester as we think about Virginia Tech's future and the opportunity for the institution to actualize its potential. I had hoped to rest during my winter break, but instead I found myself immersed in a variety of reflections. I'm going to frame the context around these 10 reflections that perhaps can seem unrelated at times. But I hope they'll lead the story about Virginia Tech, or at least my thoughts about Virginia Tech, in the context of society and humanity. So the first reflection is the Advancing the Human Condition Symposium. The goals were ambitious: to identify emerging questions, advance scholarship, convene communities. Sylvester Johnston delivered a thought-provoking, somewhat terrifying, according to some, keynote that challenged us to interrogate issues related to artificial intelligence, data, and humanity. Over the course of 3 days, almost every college participated in our conversation. My colleague Michelle DeRamo used 3 photographs to illustrate the challenges of the human condition. This one involves the mass displacement of people and refugees, and it encourages us to think broadly and compassionately about what is, in fact, humanity and the human condition of refugees. The second place prize in the competition was also related to displacement. It's a young woman sitting in Mildred. She's unnamed. And without a name, does she have any power? Does she have a voice? Who gets to tell her story? And how does it make a difference as we think about how to advance the human condition? And the third place prize goes to this portrait of Erica, who's an android. It was created by scientists in Japan. Its inclusion requires us to consider how innovations in robotics, artificial intelligence, and autonomous systems are altering the meaning of humans. So robots and refugees, these were 2 of the faces of the human condition in 2017. This conversation was rich and insightful and complex. Essentially, we sought to engage around the deep questions, often practical and philosophical, about being human and all the implications and ultimately the role of the university in advancing the human condition, specifically the role of Virginia Tech, which leads to my second reflection. This is the cover of Peter Longsign's book, Virginia Tech. While the symposium was simmering in my mind, I was simultaneously reading a book about the history. President Sands recently charged the Council on Virginia Tech's history to think about how to celebrate and honor an inclusive and comprehensive presentation of Virginia Tech as an institution prepares for its 150th anniversary in 2022. The first assignment for the Council was to read this book. I want to share a few paragraphs from a couple of chapters that stood out to me. Early parents wrote letters to the President, and this one is one of them. One man wrote President McBride and said, "No doubt you get a lot of letters from fathers telling you all about the fine quality of your son. Well, I love my son very dearly, but as far as books are concerned, I have not discovered any fine qualities yet. Will you take him in your school and see if your professors can find him?" So we're going to call this young man Mr. Not Yet. Another letter, a parent said, "Your school is supposed to build character, so I'm sending you my son. I do not want him to smoke, chew, cuss, blow, run. He does all of these things." We're going to call him Mr. Good Time. This parent, like the other, is hoping for transformation. That he can send Mr. Good Time have him emerge on the other side, having stopped smoking, chewing tobacco, cussing, chilling, and running. Was that realistic? Interestingly, perhaps so. Because even then, in 1896, Virginia Tech had a motto. Its motto, Ut Prosim, if I may serve, more on that later, was adopted in 1896, as well as the current school's policy. The opportunity for transformation, however, was only available to white men. Chapter 6 provides a sobering reality of the legacy and the history of race, racism, segregation, and discrimination in America and in Virginia. The disparity in funding impacted the chances of success for poor white and black students. More wealthy white students from all white counties were likely to have a higher chance of success because of the resources invested in it. This reality, sadly, is still the case in many areas of Virginia and the United States. The legacy of American history that continues to impact human conditions. Integration has not been, at Virginia Tech, has not been easier. The University Archive is doing a wonderful job in cataloging important events and timelines. And they will be an invaluable resource for the work of the Council in Virginia Tech History. Just want to take a few minutes to look at what the archives tell us about one particular group of students. Newspaper headlines, beginning in 1979, criticized the slow movement of not only the state, but also institutions. Overton Johnson's reflection that some institutions are going to do a good job, some are going to do a fair job, and some are going to do a darn poor job, begs the question of how we as an institution would assess our progress over almost 40 years. The 1983 article shares that Tech and Radford would not meet their diversity levels, although other institutions had actually been carried to date. The goal was for Virginia Tech to enroll 260 students. Ironically, this fall, Virginia Tech enrolled 260 students in the freshman class. In 1987, the Collegiate Times discussed Negro inclusion. The goal was to admit 490 black students, about 10% of the freshman class. This goal is consistent with President Stan's goal of having 25% of the entering class at Virginia Tech by 2022 being represented minorities. Again, that was a goal that was not met in 1987. This chart tells a story of possibility, though. In 1977, Calvin James and Glenn Valentine, many of you may know them, were hired, and in 1 year they doubled black student enrollment. And the numbers steadily increased to a high for the entering class of 392 in 1981. Again, our number this year is close to the number in 1988, 30 years ago, when the size of the entering class was much lower than their 67 units. Yet change is possible. As Calvin noted, the enrollment of black students increased by 400% since 1978, due to, in part, the work of Glenn that he described of visiting over 70 schools. I hope we can accelerate our own efforts under admissions and the work of the College Access Collaborative to that scale. Calvin and Glenn are legends at Virginia Tech and reflect the possibility and potential for change. I'm excited about the leadership of Juanis Renova and Louisa Havens, and look forward to the ways in which we can increase not only black student enrollment, but also Native American, Latinx community veterans, and other underrepresented and underserved populations in Virginia, including Mr. Good Times and Mr. Not Yet. I remain hopeful because of this photo. Part of the archive seems to represent an interesting and diverse group of cadets, athletes, musicians, and students and administrators. The picture had no caption, but I found it to represent an interesting possibility. But before this picture, about 100 years earlier, there was one young white boy. This young man was named William Addison Caldwell. He was actually born during slavery, not a slave, and during the Civil War. He lived close to Roanoke, and the legend is, or the reality is, perhaps that he walked here with his brother in 1872 with a scholarship for his $40 fees and started his academic career. I wonder about him. Why him? His brother is rarely mentioned, but I think it's important to know that he came with a buddy, a friend, a sibling. He didn't come alone. Now, though his brother didn't graduate, I think we should have recognized him. So, what about this kid, William? Was he a Mr. Good Time? A Mr. Not Yet? So it leads me to my reflection 3. My daughter gave my husband a book called Outliers for a college book. She had read it for a class and thought he might like it. What he you can't leave a book sitting around and not expect me to be here. So I promptly made it a shared gift and got to read it. What did I learn? I learned that based on the Matthew effect, based on a biblical scripture, that those who have get more and those who don't even have get what they don't have taken away. I'm not sure that I understand that principle, but that's what theologians do. So for the purpose of this reflection, Malcolm Gladwell essentially presents several case studies that seem to challenge the notion that there are just a few uniquely gifted outliers that are responsible for great achievements. One case study involves soccer players and the reality that a particular cutoff date implicates the number of soccer players who can be successful based on their ability. The implication is that only a few are given opportunities to succeed. We prematurely write off people as failures, and we overlook the role that we in society, leaders, administrators, and those with power, play in determining who makes it and who doesn't. Another case study involves Bill Gates and the 10,000-hour rule. The 10,000-hour rule argues that the success is the result of a particular set of circumstances that often provide someone with an extensive, almost unlimited amount of time to develop and cultivate the talent. Bill Gates' argument is, became the co-founder and billionaire because in 1968, as a 13-year-old, he had unlimited access to the computer. Why just him? Well, it looks like it's only him. Another outlier is Bill Joy, co-founder of Silicon Valley firm Sun Microsystems, who in 1971 had essentially unlimited access to the University of Michigan's Computer Center. He says Bill Joy was brilliant. He wanted to learn. That was a big part of it. But before he could become an expert, someone had to give him the opportunity to learn how to be an expert. There are several other case studies in the book that he uses to support his argument about success. The discussion of Harlan, Kentucky, and the Appalachian culture of honor actually is particularly fascinating. But the takeaway is, for at least Gladwell, is that success is the result of the convergence of a variety of factors. It follows a predictable course. It's not necessarily the brightest who succeed. Outliers are not really outliers. Outliers are those who have been given opportunities, who have the strength and presence of mind to succeed. He argues that the world would be a better place if we replace this patchwork of lucky breaks and arbitrary advantages with a society that provides opportunities for all. So the recognition that we choose to challenge systems, structures, and opportunities, we can perhaps make the world a better place for all of humanity. I finished Outlier and asked my daughter what she was reading, and she said, "Wait, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking." I said, can I read that too? So I did. So Wink is essentially a book about how decisions are often made in the blink of an eye, sometimes with good and accurate outcomes, and sometimes with disastrous outcomes, like the police shootings and unconscious bias. It's about the potential of combining deliberation with instinct. In the process of reading Wink, I found another outlier. Abby Conant, a female trombone player, an anomaly. In 1970, high school football players encouraged her to play the trombone. In 1980, she auditioned for the Munich Philharmonic, an orchestra known then as the Orchestra of the Fastest Movement, that had swastikas on its music up and through the 1990s. She auditioned as one of 33 candidates, hidden by a screen because one of the candidates was an orchestra member's son. She was at best and presumed to be a man. When they announced her name and found she was a woman, they nevertheless hired her but immediately demoted her. It took her 8 years to be reinstated and an additional 5 to get the same wage. She was Juilliard trained, and because, as is so often the case, when women are minorities or in fields typically dominated by men, they have to be twice as good. So Abby was the best. And though not presented as an outlier story, but as an opportunity to think about unconscious bias, I see it, however, as an opportunity to think about the difference between being an outlier and an outsider. The cost of being an outlier, especially for particular identities, those with disabilities, veterans, LGBTQ population, often means fighting against a system not designed for you, and sometimes outliers become outsiders. Her experience raises the question of the relationship between outliers, outsiders, and equity. Her battle opened the door for other women. Before blind auditions, women were less than 5% of orchestras. 25 years later, there's almost equity. Yet while Caldwell states that it's our responsibility to act, the question becomes, did any men act with her? What was the cost of her battle to act? Who is socialized to be a voice for equity? To speak up on behalf of others? How often do the masses remain silent? Yes, we need strong women to persevere and speak up, to challenge. But even more importantly, we need men to be champions for women as a group. Because we have to challenge this maxim that those who have get more and those who have not get even the little that they have taken away. Maybe that's Ut Prosim. So this issue of opportunity and access, Abby's story, leads me to reflection story. During the break, my publisher, Peter Lang, let me know that the book I've been working on for 5 years would be complete. The book, The Black Woman's Journey from Cotton Picking to College Professor, is about my mother. Reflecting on outliers, I pondered my mother's status as an outlier and outsider. Started thinking about her journey. Where were her 10,000 hours? Many of those hours were actually in the cotton field and serving as a maid. Her journey of picking cotton and sharecropping as one of 8 siblings, in poverty during legalized segregation, discrimination, racism, and sexism, to become a college professor reveals, like Abby's story, the difficulty of being an outlier. Her pyramid did have hard work in it, but also mentors and teachers and some lucky breaks and extraordinary commitment to service and determination. She was an outlier and outsider. In the 1940s, only 12% of blacks aged 25 to 29 had completed high school. Less than 2% could claim a college degree. In the 1950s, only 3.4% of black women had completed 4 or more years of college. And in 1979, less than 1% of professors were black women. A statistic that's not remarkably different today. As a social worker who majored in religion in undergraduate school, she thought deeply about humanity and the human condition and the ways in which society can and should empower those who are most vulnerable, but also have tremendous capacity and potential. What is the role of universities in this question of opportunity and potential? Who are the outliers and the outsiders? Here at Virginia Tech, where are the Mildred Sirls? Where are those young boys the parents wrote about to McBride in need of opportunity, guidance, and direction? Are they here at Virginia Tech? If so, what is their experience? In an analogy related to biology, Caldwell argues that the tallest tree is the tallest, not necessarily because of the acorn, but because of other factors like sunlight, soil, protection from predators, and human destruction. He encourages us not to look at the tall tree, but the forest. And so that takes me to reflection 5. The forest of Blacksburg and Virginia Tech. Reflection 5 is based on our new effort to brand Virginia Tech. We said that Virginia Tech, the way the logo was redrawn, gave us the ability to show a softness at the intersection of pathway openings. The new video that introduced the brand included the lunch table. Someone who didn't know about lunch tail was an odd image. Never had a lunch tail like that. Had a good old paper bag. So I had to do my own research, and I learned that it represented the Hokies football defense in 1995 when the Sox started. And it had symbolized an article that the blue-collar approach the Hokies accepted so many years ago, reflecting the population from the Blue Ridge Mountains. William Caldwell was over. He was exactly the type of young man envisioned by the Mormons, part of the common people, farmers of America, farmers who had been an outlier in terms of access to education. In announcing our brand, he said, Caldwell's journey connects with those who followed him. Who has followed him, I wonder? And who is supposed to follow him? And of course, I have to wonder, where's his buddy? Mildred, his brother. The brand campaign's central message is that Virginia Tech is reimagining the role of education and technology in every aspect of life to serve as a force for positive change in the world without boundaries. An amazing vision for that. We then encourage others to claim their role in this new reimagined institution that has focused on social change and community. So I thinking about claiming such an authoritative and assertive act, an act requiring confidence, conviction, and character. And I started wondering who gets to play a role, and why and how. Like a play, you can't just walk in and be Superwoman or Superman. You have to audition, compete, and be selected, and be the best. In performances, we know that who plays what role determines the quality of the play. And so it does matter who gets to play what role. And we know that sometimes, if we're honest, some don't have to audition. They're just already given the part. Others need years of preparation. And some are like little blades of grass, in the middle of concrete sidewalks, dodging footsteps, fighting for sunlight, fighting against the rabbits and the lumberjacks, waiting for opportunity. I want to argue that those opportunities are opportunities that we try to provide at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, I want to argue, in Blacksburg is an outlier. Geographically removed, historically actually, if you read Peter's book, a dark horse candidate for land grant distinction. And organizationally, an anomaly with the course. In fact, I've often said that to come to Virginia Tech, you have to be a pioneer, adventurous, unafraid of the wilderness, unafraid of the mountains and all their majesty, unafraid of back roads, with seemingly no end or direction that seem to go nowhere. Unafraid. You have to be curious enough to make the trek and check it out. And that curiosity then becomes a critical skill that enables us to further our success here. So geographically, not only are we distinct, but we have this anomaly of our founding historically. When our young friend, Caldwell, showed up, he joined with 131 others of a billion of two companies in 1872. That legacy, shown in one of these photos from Company B from 1895 to 1896, exemplifies the institution that emerged as Virginia Tech from the Old and Impressive Institute of the 1850s. The march that the Corps undertakes every fall and spring is symbolic of this 13-mile trek, which actually was 26, that Addison undertook in his walk from the Roanoke area. An anomaly because Virginia Tech is actually one of only two large public institutions that maintain the full-time Corps of Cadets. The website for the Corps says everyone is looking for great leaders. We nurture and create them. The focus is on the development of practical, ethical, leadership skills, and it says that these leaders are committed to a way of life to which not all choose to aspire. A way of life that not all choose to aspire. Maybe that's outlier. What is this way of life, I wonder? The website states that the purpose of each cadet is to make communities better, to make our country stronger, to make the world a better place to live and grow. I wonder, is this the role all students should be claiming? Or is this Ut Prosim Imperative? More on that to go to reflection. Reflection 6 was that this semester I've been assigned the task of leading strategic and continuous planning, trying to play my role and to think about how to engage the campus in a conversation about the practical realities of vision. The role is to help Virginia Tech actualize the potential and the vision of beyond boundaries by ensuring clarity, vision, justification, and strategy for achieving goals, metrics, and accountability. How do we get to where we want to go, and are we all clear on where we want to go? The process involves reviewing required plans that I also read over break, including diversity plans and thinking about key initiatives. With all the key initiatives underway, we need to be able to express the feasibility of success. As a continuous planning process, we'll need to be adaptable, flexible, but also definitive. So in between reading the history of Virginia Tech, links, outliers, strategic plans, I had a revelation. Not of biblical implications like the Matthew effect, but inspiring nonetheless. I started wondering about our core values. We have several disparate, yet seemingly connected value statements. From the 8 pylon virtues, I'm sure we know all of those, given that they're so fundamental to who we are. To the aspirations for student learning, to the principles of community, to our mission statement and safety. So the pylon. I wonder, when we claim our role, do we claim these values of the pylon? If so, should brotherhood be replaced with maybe humanity? Are the pylon values just for the core? Do we ever socialize the larger campus about these values? And then we have by Aspirations for Student Learning that embody the entire academic experience. Students need to be socialized into this perspective. What role in partnership with student affairs and academic affairs do they actually play in promoting these values? And then we have principles of community. I wonder how these connect to other value statements, as well as our mission statement and our statement of purpose. Do they overlap? Do they connect in any way? Interestingly enough, the mission statement and statement of purpose do not explicitly mention Ut Prosim. Should it be mentioned? Does the Ut Prosim Imperative have a place? So these questions lead me to reflection of the stuff. As we begin to work with strategic planning, the Office for Strategic Affairs wanted clarity on our goals. We discussed the proposed vision, which is a sustainable Virginia Tech committed to Ut Prosim, and a mission of guiding continuous and strategic planning that achieves measurable goals, ensuring a sustainable Virginia Tech committed to Ut Prosim. This vision and mission for the office connects us to reflection 7. Virginia, common growth, sometimes referred to as Old Dominion, which actually confuses us. Actually, the name of the college was Dominion. So why am I thinking about the North Capital region, Arlington, and Virginia? Well, actually, it's integrally connected to Beyond Boundaries. Beyond Boundaries stated that Virginia Tech must reflect the role in which students live and work, differentiate itself with unique value and personalized education, and be sustainable, adaptable, and successful. So, in order to operationalize Beyond Boundaries, I began to focus on 2 key goals: reflect the role and differentiate with unique value. So I wanted to look a little bit into what is the world that Virginia Tech students will work and live. This is a map of the world of the most and least ethnically diverse countries. It shows the United States in the middle. The greener the countries are more ethnically diverse, and the orange countries are more homogeneous. There are a few trends that you can see right away. Countries in Europe and Northeast Asia can be more homogeneous. According to the Center for American Progress, Virginia is a vanguard in the demographic transition in our nation. It's a microcosm of what our nation will look like. It's a leader in the reality of a shifting demographic. And they chose, Center for American Progress, chose Virginia as the first location for a series of roundtables to begin to understand how communities can embrace diversity as one of its greatest assets. What's going on in Virginia? Well, residents of color since 2000 represent 76% of new residents. 10% of new residents are foreign-born, with the largest growth from Asian Latin. Over 100 languages are spoken in Virginia. That kind of connects us to that cultural diversity that I mentioned in the roadmap. More babies of color were born in the past 3 years, and in many locations, the under 18 majority are young people of color. They are the potential new Hokies, William Caldwell, Mildred, Sirls, that we need to pay attention to if we're going to remain relevant. These populations are having an economic impact, creating businesses and being visible and viable. But there's another reality that we often don't discuss. Not everyone is on board with this demographic shift, according to the census. Some residents, older, white, and poor, are not as aware of these shifts in different geographic areas. They will need to become part of the conversation in order to realize that they too benefit from the diversity of their community. The demographic reality in Virginia is that it's almost 20% Black, 8% Latino, 6% Asian. And that demographic shift will inevitably impact higher education. President Sam's comments to Roanoke Times reflect this reality. In November 2016, in announcing the goal to increase diversity, President Sam noted that employers want more diversity, and industry partners want to hire more students from more diverse backgrounds. They also want to make sure that all students have experiences interacting with individuals from a variety of backgrounds, so that they are prepared to work with those who may be different from them. This is about Beyond Boundaries, about reflecting the world, being sustainable, being inclusive. So it's important to acknowledge the reality that not only African Americans, Native Americans, first generation students, eligible students, veterans, but other important populations that need to reflect our city. The key message here is that there is an imperative, perhaps there's a close imperative, for Virginia Tech to be a destination to recruit talent. There's a land grant imperative for the William Caldwell, the Mr. Goodtime, the Mr. Not Yet, the Sirls of the world, for these outliers who might be outsiders, come to Virginia Tech. And the question is, can we deliver upon this imperative? Which leads me to reflection 8, and I believe that yes, we can deliver. 2 years ago, I was here and delivered a keynote at the same event. I went and found it. It was called It's Time to Read. I shared that as a scholar practitioner, I'm interested in how to lead change from an academically informed perspective. I talked about a model called the Transdisciplinary Applied Social Justice Model. I shared the challenges of praxis and the role of power and the reality of diversity and inclusion being impacted by shifts of power. Who's in charge, who's in control, who has a say, who speaks up, who's in the room, and who's going to change policies, practices, and procedures. And I talked about resistance. And though I've never taken a physics class, I actually use the physics analogy to talk about mass, inertia, change, acceleration, and unbalanced forces. Talk about social movements as unbalanced forces that move society from inertia to transformation. And I encourage us to think about diversity strategies that would be non-conservative, positive displacement, acceleration, and philosophy. 2 years later, where are we? We have a vision statement for the Office for Inclusion and Diversity that envisions a just and inclusive community, with a mission to serve as a catalyst for capacity building to promote a just and inclusive community through the Inclusive BT. Inclusive BT is the institutional and individual commitment to Ut Prosim in the spirit of community, diversity, and equity. The 4 goals of Inclusive BT include institutionalization and accountability, representational diversity, climate, and the academic mission. We've made progress on each goal. We have existing and new structures that are institutionalized. We started Inclusive BT Project 22 to increase the recruitment of underrepresented students and also retention. We are working to increase faculty diversity, and I was delighted to meet some of the fellows last night for dinner. I'm glad you're here. And miraculously, through the engagement and the commitment of the board, we have many exciting efforts, including diversity EDU, around creating a welcoming, affirming, safe, and accessible campus climate. A new effort will be Gender at BT, which will be announced soon, which is a committee looking specifically at issues of gender, but those that uniquely impact women on our campus. We've also made great progress in the new strategic goal area, and I remain hopeful that we can see a Center for Advancing the Human Condition here in Virginia Tech. So we've done a great deal in 2 years. Just as I thought maybe we could celebrate, Reflection 8 came on my radar. And our home in New York about diversity. The article says, in the late 90s, people running corporations and overseeing newsrooms began complaining of inflection of falsehoods. While many of these institutions broadly supported efforts to create a more diverse American workforce, actually doing that by recruiting and nurturing minority talent was hard, often exhausting. People are willing to be tolerant, but past a certain point, it feels like being ordered to eat the peat. Eat the peat. An interesting statement. I had to do a little bit of research to understand this now. I found that Alf Brown had an episode where a little boy in a normal suburban house is told that he can't leave the table until he eats his pee. And he hasn't left the table for a very long time. So I started to wonder, what's up with the pee? And I found that they're not on any list that represents the most popular vegetables, and seemingly have never been. And then I had another revelation. Similar to the Matthew effect. Those that have get more, those that don't get have even taken away what they don't have. What about the peas? Outliers. And it's like sometimes they have to be ordered to eat something. And thus the analogy, sometimes we have to be pushed and prodded to do the uncomfortable, to keep the peace, to advance humanity, to promote diversity and inclusion. So I'd like for us to consider, just briefly, what it might mean to be ordered to eat with peace in the context of an Ut Prosim Imperative, as a way to ensure that Virginia Tech reflects a world in which students will live and work, differentiate themselves, and sustainable. Note that the Beyond Boundaries vision says must. Virginia Tech must. So, an imperative. Don't quite understand these first two words here. However, the takeaway is that Ut means that, so that, in order to, in order that, according to the Latin dictionary. Prosim means to be in front of, which is an interesting link to our core cadets. But it can also mean for the benefit of, to be at the service of, to be useful to. So a possible and more comprehensive definition of equivalent to be, so that I may be in front of and in service to humanity. This being out in front of is consistent with recent advice offered by the author of Menah Pratt-Clarke. He says, expose yourself to as much randomness as possible. And at conferences, no one else is attending, reasons no one else is reading, and talk to people no one else is talking to. Talk to people no one else is talking to. How do we promote that as an institution? Ownership of an institution, this willingness to move outside of comfort zones, this willingness to be out in front. These questions take me back to the core. The core has designed an experience of transformation for 1,000 students. Their purpose, to make our communities better, country stronger, the world a better place to live and grow, a 24-hour leadership lab. And the model of the core moved from being an outlier to a point of distinction for all students. I'm not suggesting that all students be required to participate in it. What I am suggesting is that we might consider how we might use the core as a model to think about how we differentiate ourselves as an institution. Our motto, I would argue, prevents our students from choosing who to work with, who to be friends, who to serve, who to support, who to help, who to work with. Our motto requires that our students are prepared to work with anyone and everyone. So how do we do this? Can we as an institution create a structure that encourages a youth way of leading for all students? How do we facilitate students moving outside their safe and comfortable spaces and high school alumni networks? How do we help students to form more friendships across differences and stretch spaces of unfamiliarity and discomfort? How do we truly capitalize upon opportunities presented by the residents of experience to truly be transformational? How do we really think about our curriculum, both co-curricularly and the actual curriculum, to ensure that we're actually a leader in building communities of prosperity? An Ut Prosim Imperative thinks about inclusive leadership development paradigm. It will take some critical elements to be successful. A commitment to a clear own vision that enables us to articulate what the imperative is, what it means, and what its outcomes are. It will require us to think about how we integrate multiple existing values and value statements. Most importantly, it will require diversity across all dimensions of difference, in an environment where everyone feels comfortable being who they are. It will require more of the Mildred, the William Caldwell, and the vulnerable young men that parents wrote Mr. President's life. It will require careful thought around the integration of curriculum and co-curricular programming, focused on these objectives, and actually a very high level of diversity and competency across the institution. The possibilities for Virginia Tech to be a place that brings together diverse students from various backgrounds and provides an experience that enables them to become leaders and promoting a just and inclusive life. This Virginia Tech difference is a vision that corporations and industries want, and I believe will support it. I'm excited as I begin to work with our advancement team on a new Inclusive VP Corporate Partners Program that we hope will garner corporate and industry support and help us develop leaders here at Virginia Tech for the new Virginia and the new America coming to the future. So it's not going to be easy work, and it feels like we have a mountain to climb. And we do, and that leads me to my final reflection. My final reflection from Addison. Over winter break, I had the privilege of going to Morocco, and my son and I went hiking in the Addison. We had a guide to help us. He spoke Berber, Arabic, French, and just a little English. As I started up the mountain, it was a bit steeper than I anticipated and a bit more daunting than I had imagined. I realized I needed to take notice of my neighbor. So I did. And the guy saw me. And his eyes got really big, gigantic. And he said, "Asthmatic?" French word for asthmatic. And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay. We go slowly, slowly." And then he led us, my son and I, up the mountain. But he led me differently. He pointed to each particular step or rock for me to use. He held my hand. He went in front of me. He was prepared to catch me should I stumble. And he ensured that we climbed the summit together and that we descended together. For me, he exemplified the Ut Prosim Imperative. Out in front and in service to humanity.